We are Southeastern 16 covering SEC football today. And look, you got these teams winding up spring practice now, spring games, or I'd say spring games, more of glorified spring practices these days coming up. But we're going to dive into the Alabama Crimson Tide. Fascinating team, Kalen DeBoer year two. And to do that, we have Colin Gay. He covers the Alabama Crimson Tide with the Tuscaloosa News. So, Colin, appreciate your time today to talk some Alabama football.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Happy to do it.
So spring practice winding down in Tuscaloosa as we sit here recording this. And I look, a lot of folks are already talking about like who the quarterback is going to be in 2025. Obviously, it's just spring. No decision has been made. It's probably not going to be a decision we'll see until close to kickoff, late August. But just from what you've seen, what you've heard from the coaches, and just those who have seen practice, what is the competition looking like? We know there's three guys, but what does the quarterback competition look like in Alabama right now?
Yeah, I think that as of now, based on how Alabama is talking, it's kind of I would be surprised whatever the spring game looks like or A-Day looks like on Saturday. I would be surprised if it's anybody but Ty Simpson taking the first snaps, just based on Alabama has made it a priority about how important experiences, and especially going into a season opener against Florida State, big time, major Power 4 program, and it's experience is something that's vital for Alabama on the defensive side of the ball too, and they've kind of molded over and talked about it, how important it is for the team as a whole. And most experience comes from Ty Simpson and his 50 career pass attempts. He's been at the front of the line each time that I've been on the sideline in a practice. Him, then Austin Mack, then Keelan Russell. All three have had reps with the ones. All three have had, have kind of balanced the load a little bit, more so Ty Simpson and Austin Mack. But it would be a surprise for me, at least, if heading into this offseason, heading into the summer, if the number one quarterback on the board at this point for Alabama is no one but Ty Simpson.
How does he fit into what Kalen DeBoer wants to do with new offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb? How exactly does Ty Simpson fit what they want to do?
Yeah, I think you got a guy who kind of is the prototypical Ryan Grubb passer or the Kalen DeBoer guy, right? Like you look at the quarterbacks of old for Ryan Grubb, whether it's Kalen DeBoer, whether it's, Jake Haener, whether it's Michael Penix. You got these guys who are not much of, it's way more pro style than it is the runner that Jalen Milroe was last year. You got a guy in Ty Simpson who is athletic, but is a pass first kind of guy, very, very accurate, can move the ball with his arm pretty consistently. He, you hear about, when it comes to receivers, asked to describe, like what they want out of a quarterback, they want a guy who throws a catchable ball, and that's Ty Simpson, right? Like, he's consistent. Is he as flashy as maybe the Keelan Russells of the world? No, but I think he's a guy that you kind of know what you're going to get. You got a guy who's a prototypical quarterback leader. That's the biggest takeaway, and the reason why I'm so kind of like adamant about Ty Simpson's the guy, at least for right now, is because, Alabama had him on their leadership council in January, even before this whole thing started. He's been talked about at the front of the line, from an offensive line perspective, asking Gino Vandermark who his starting five is if Alabama football were to field a basketball team. He's the only non-offensive lineman that was mentioned. Ty Simpson is thought of very, very highly in the Alabama football program, and I would be shocked if he doesn't get the first reps here.
As far as the surrounding cast for Ty Simpson, receivers specifically, what does that room look like? What have you seen from the receivers in spring?
I mean, it's a room that Jeremy Bernard even today called the best room in the nation, right? You got, starting with Jeremy Bernard, who looks like every bit of a veteran Alabama guy as possible. Then you have Ryan Williams, we all know about Ryan Williams in terms of the way what he could do both outside, potentially inside as a slot guy, shifty, big playmaker, things like that. So those are the two definites. Then you have Isaiah Horton, this big, long, kind of touchdown grabbing guy that really Alabama didn't have last year, kind of a red zone threat at 6'3", 6'4". And so those are going to be your main cast of characters, at least from the top of the line. And then you have, I think what separates this whole room that really it really didn't have last year is kind of the depth. I mean, you have guys like Rico Scott, you have guys, Jalen Hale, Jalen Ibakwe, who's moving from cornerback, Cole Adams, who's returning. So a lot of pieces that, may not be household names like Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams, but guys who can make this room feel a lot deeper than it was a year ago. And then you have the unknowns, right? Derek Meadows, who's been very, very highly touted by coaches and players here this offseason. And then Latsier Brooks, who's getting a lot of love recently for his play during spring ball. I think it's a room, Jeremy Bernard even said today, what does it have? What does this room have that last year didn't? Explosion. And I think you're going to see that no matter who else is going to be at no matter who's going to be at quarterback this fall.
Well, it always starts up front. So what's the offensive line for the Tide look like?
Yeah, I think if you ask Alabama, it's kind of the complete opposite of what last year was, right? Like the veteran side of the line is the right side. And for Alabama, I think you're breathing a sigh of relief when it comes to Woken Formby, because this time last year he was battling for a starting job and he was unproven. He was a guy, and now like whether you talk to coaches, players, even Woken Formby, this dude is confident and he's kind of ready to take that leadership role and kind of that cement that status. It's not a question. It doesn't seem to be a question anymore who's the starting right tackle. It's Woken Formby. So him and Jaden Roberts on the right side, Parker Brailsford manning the center. And then, Caden Proctor, there's no question there at left tackle, but it's who's behind him where the question comes. And that can be even shown if there's an injury on the right side too, but there's really not a lot of depth outside, not a lot of room between, say, Caden Proctor or Woken Formby, and then the freshman class that's coming in, guys like Jackson Lloyd, who's a freak, Michael Carroll, who we'll talk about here in a minute. But I think that's the biggest question mark is, okay, if Caden Proctor or Woken Formby go down, who's the answer? I mean, it could be Ola Salinen, who used to be a tackle out of high school, came in, played primarily guard at Alabama. Could be the Ball State transfer, Arkella Nungwam. We'll see. But it could be one of the freshmen. But in terms of like the actual starting lineup, left guard is obviously the main question here. Gino Vandermark and Cam Dewberry are the two guys fighting for reps there. Michael Carroll, I would expect as the season goes on, will probably get a chance. That guy, I mean, he's too good. He's too big and too much of a highly touted prospect to keep off the field for too long. So I'm very, very high on Michael Carroll. I think he sees the starting lineup quickly, but that's kind of I think the main starting lineup question is at left guard, and then just depth across the board is going to be what to focus on this offensive line.
Moving over to the defensive side, while there's a new offensive coordinator, Kane Wommack back as the defensive coordinator, what does his defense look like? What kind of changes will we see in the 2025 version?
I think you see a defense that is, is hungry for production, right? And you saw that a lot in the defensive backfield last year. I remember Kane Wommack starting his press conferences, and he was talking he's listing all of the takeaway opportunities, interceptions, fumbles, these things that made Alabama's defense Alabama last year, right? I think you're going to see that same focus in the defensive backfield. You're going to see more of a focus on turning pressures up front into sacks and tackles for loss. If you ask LT Overton, I mean, that's his main focus. That's why he came back to Alabama for another year. He very well could have been drafted based on potential alone. He's a guy that, was a borderline first-round pick, even with, say, I don't have the notes in front of me, but maybe like 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks last year. But he, was near the top of the country in pressures. He just didn't finish. He feels he could take that next step. on a line that, has a lot to prove, whether it's, LT Overton, you got Tim Keenan coming back, James Smith, who made a statement for the defense in the Rely Quest Bowl. You got, and then the depth behind them really kind of unproven there too. So I think you got a defense that's, has the same kind of mentality, just shifted a little bit in terms of focus to adding, in addition to the takeaways and things like that, but finishing on pressures, sacks, tackles for loss, forced fumbles, things of that nature.
Who are some guys maybe in spring practice that have either been a surprise on defense or that you think could really step up this season?
I think the big one that comes to mind for me immediately, and honestly, this isn't a shock to me, but it's Dijon Lee. Dijon Lee, the freshman out of California, 6'4", 193 pounds. This guy, I talked to him and a couple of people around him for a story in November, and I knew from that moment, I was like, yeah, this dude's going to be special this fall. And there's really not a lot of room for a guy like Dijon Lee. But man, like I was saying about Michael Carroll, like this dude is built to play almost immediately, kind of continue that pipeline that, Damani Jackson took advantage of, that Xavier Brown took advantage of, what Xavier Brown called a pipeline that started by Bryce Young a couple of years, like a long time ago there at Mater Dei, right? So I think Dijon Lee could see the field close to immediately. He's the guy that's been manning like one of the cornerback spots in Damani Jackson's absence this spring, and he looks comfortable, man. They added Cameron Calhoun, who's also a stud, Cincinnati guy coming from Utah, but Dijon Lee, I think he could be in top 2, top 3 in terms of reps for freshmen this fall. And it's just going to be way too hard to keep this dude off the field.
Going kind of big picture, Alabama football here. Obviously 9-4, 2024, Kalen DeBoer's first year. To Alabama fans, that's not what you want with your Alabama football team. What's the vibe around the program right now? Going into DeBoer's second year, got Ryan Grubb, offensive coordinator, got some good players. What's just kind of the vibe around the program as they leave spring practice?
Yeah, I think it's one of basically, comfort. I think it's one of, kind of a sigh of relief, for lack of a better term, just because, they're not going through what they did last year, right? Which, was a program in pandemonium, a program in flux, looking to not only build a spring roster and kind of hire a coaching staff and secure a recruiting class, not only 2024, but also go into 2025 too. This is a program that kind of is comfortable. It's one that knows what it is. It's one where, Kalen DeBoer, in a portal world, like I guess coaches have to do this, but he's not trying to, convince people to stay anymore, right? There's no we're feeling them out, they're feeling us. Like there's not a lot of that energy going on. Like Kalen, it's almost 4 losses. This isn't a good way to put it, but it's almost like a proven product, right? Like they know what they're going to get when they're at Alabama or what they want to put forward. So with that, it's kind of taking that next step, bringing in a guy in Ryan Grubb that Kalen DeBoer wanted to run his offense anyway, or in the first place, kind of bringing the band back together there, getting, more of the guys that Kalen DeBoer and his staff want to kind of, create this future of Alabama in a post-Saban world. I think it's one with obvious there's expectation, but it's one that Kalen DeBoer, he doesn't have to establish anything. It is established. It's now just taking that next step into, okay, this is what my Alabama looks like.
Yeah, good stuff there. Colin Gay, he covers the Alabama Crimson Tide for the Tuscaloosa News. Colin, man, really appreciate you coming on with us, talking some Alabama football. We'll do it again soon, but thanks for coming on.
All right, no problem, man.
We are Southeastern 16. We got you covered, all things SEC. We'll be back with more football talk soon here on Southeastern 16.